Welcome, everyone, to Children as Naturalists. Tonight, we will be talking about implementing a forest school approach in family childcare. So, we know from your responses to the question, what are you hoping to learn, that many of you are coming tonight hoping to incorporate more nature in your program, spend more time outside, and are looking for more ideas on how to engage children with nature and use it as a teaching tool. So we are going to be exploring all of those things tonight, whether it be you going to an actual forest, traveling to, say, your neighborhood park, or staying in your backyard. My name is Grace Eilers. I am the Family Child Care Content Specialist with Satellite Family Child Care System, and I will pass it along to one of my co-presenters tonight, Ashley.
Greetings. My name is Ashley Kasi Golden. I am the co-founder of Gather Forest School, and I also do a small homeschooling pod out of my home with Afrocentric Montessori. So happy to be here.
And pass it over to Jen.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jen Jorgensen. I'm an accreditation consultant with Satellite. I'm really excited to be here. When my children were little, we were part of a forest school experience, multi-age from birth to like early elementary. So I'm excited to share some of my experience with that this evening.
All right, and Jana.
Hi, it's great to see you all. I'm Jana, one of the mental health consultants with Reach Dane, and this is a passion project. We're working to open a very first outdoor preschool program for Head Start. So just here to share some of our thinking around that.
All right, let's dive into it. These are the questions that we all will hopefully be answering by the end of tonight's training. If you've been joining us for other curriculum philosophy trainings, through Satellite, we typically will do small group activities. Tonight, we have so much great information to share with you and so many voices. We will stay in one large group together and use the chat and use the mute and unmute button to learn and experience all the great things that we're going to be talking about together. So these are the questions. Number one, hopefully we'll be able to answer by the end of tonight. What is forest school? What does it look like in different settings? Also, we'll be talking about why nature is so important in early childhood. And finally, how do you do this safely in your family child care program? What are the risks that you have to think about? That is
Hold on, Taylor.
That is what we will be diving into. So before we start talking about forest school, pause and think about this question. What is your current relationship with nature? Do you love nature? Do you struggle with some aspects of being outside? Think about what your nature experience was like as a child. And if you're willing and able, please feel free to share those answers in the chat. Thank you all so much. And I don't have time to read them all, but we appreciate it. I encourage all of you to spend time reading through others' responses and feel free to react to them or reply. This chat can be a space for you to have side conversations as we continue. Now we're going to begin diving into the forest school ethos. So this approach to early education may look slightly different than some of the others that we've explored in the series, mainly because I often see it referred to as an ethos, which is more a set of practices to engage in, whereas a philosophy, that's more of a set of beliefs that guides what you do. So today we are going to be very action-based and talking a lot about what you can do with children to support their connection with nature. And for those who've joined us on a time or two know that we always start by placing it in a historical context. Nature-based education is nothing new, but forest school in particular began really in Scandinavia in the early 20th century and gained a lot of popularity in the United Kingdom, which you can see here, both of those regions on the map of Europe are outlined when some scholars traveled to Scandinavia and witnessed this very, very unique approach to education. Scandinavians put very, very high value on the concept of friluftsliv, or free open air life. So today you can find forest schools or forest kindergartens. They're gaining popularity, and now there are even advocacy organizations that help promote these approaches, such as the Forest School Association of the United Kingdom and the American Forest Kindergarten Association in the United States. But really the core of the forest school approach can be condensed down to really a single sentence. Regular, long sessions in an outdoor space over time and in all weather. So we are going to break this down for you today, starting with regular, long sessions over time. So if you wanted to begin implementing a forest school approach, you would want to be outside for at least, they recommend 2 hours at a time, because meaningful experiences with nature take time to develop, and over at least 2 seasons so that children can witness the changing of the seasons. And in Wisconsin, it is quite drastic here in our beautiful state. So Ashley, I'm curious, what does this look like in your program? How is your program set up to meet these two pieces?
So yes, so for our forest schools, we're located in Atlanta, Georgia. And so I will say our climate is more mild when we think about our winters, but we spend from 8:30 to 12:30 outside the whole time, even in rain. And rain is usually a light shower. If it's anything heavier, we do seek shelter if it's a heavy downpour. But we fit into the regular long sessions because we spend our whole time outdoors. But if your eyebrows are raising, if you're like, okay, that's a lot. I tell folks you can start if you do morning meeting or morning circle. You could do like a morning exploration when children are coming in. You can have a nice invitation outdoors where parents can do the drop off where you're outside if the weather is beautiful, or even if it's a little chilly, just warm. And then you could do your morning circle and maybe even do a lesson before coming in, because then you could hit that 2 hours in a more gentler flow.
Thanks, Ashley. Now we are going to talk about this very, very important piece in an outdoor space. So this can be, obviously it's called forest school. So they recommend it be in a forest, but it doesn't need to be. It can be a backyard, a neighborhood park, or a community garden. Nature's all around you. Just they recommend a forest because the benefit of it is that it already provides so much for the children that there is less work on you as the educator. But that does not mean that this type of approach cannot be implemented in other spaces, such as a community garden or a backyard. So any type of outdoor space recommended to be the same outdoor space that you're going to. So if you are going to a forest in your neighborhood, have it be that same space in the forest or your backyard that you go to every day. And now I'm wondering, Ashley, what does your outdoor space look like?
We are co-located with a community garden. So in our area, they have 5 gardens that we rotate. So it's almost a set schedule. Like every Tuesday, we're going to the same space. So it gets that the long sessions is regular. The children get to see the same space over all the seasons. But again, we're not located in a forest. It's a community garden. And what's so beautiful about having community space that is that the community also take care of it. They care for the flowers, they care for the vegetables. We have chickens and goats that we get to visit and see. And it's really a gem in the community that it was nice to be able to be co-located in a space. So if you, like Grace was saying, like if you find a forest or a wooded place in your neighborhood that you can think about, like how can I add that into my schooling? It is really impactful.
Just a few other examples of outdoor spaces. As you can see on the left, that is a backyard that has grass, uneven earth to walk on. There's a hill, a tree. On the right, you can see again a backyard that has raised planters with wood chips, tree stumps, and rocks. And both are representations of outdoor spaces that could be utilized for the forest school approach. And one thing that I would encourage you to think about, and when I look at these two different photos, is the diversity of plant life in your outdoor space. You're thinking about the picture on the left. Maybe they could bring in more different types of plants to add to the space because not only will that create a lush outdoor environment, you are also going to attract different types of bugs and animals, and you will create a more richer ecosystem for children to engage with. So with that being said, if you're unable to transport children to a forest, no worries. You can bring these pieces into your outdoor space that you have access to. Ashley, any other suggestions for bringing nature into, say, a more urban or suburban setting?
See, I'm nodding my head the whole time because I have a little nature space in my backyard, and I did just that. Started with planting flowers because before I didn't have the dragonflies, bees, moths, and butterflies. So I was like, all right, let me bring some plants in. So I literally Googled what are pollinator flowers. They gave me a list, and I'm like, okay, I started some from seeds, but then I also checked out my local area to see if I could buy seedlings. Did a much better job growing seedlings than starting from seeds. And literally now my yard is buzzing with life, and there's more diversity for the children to see the animals and see the insects. Even what else did we do? We brought in rocks and we laid them down because now when the kids are digging and lifting up the rocks, there's creatures underneath. So then they take their magnifying glass and look at the earthworms, the ants, the little beetles, the roly-poly bugs. And so that brings other conversations in. And when I tell you I go to like Home Depot, Lowe's, Walmart, I always check the clearance aisle because you'll be surprised the little things you can find, but it definitely is a slow build. I started in May and like every month just added something here and there. So when the children came in August, it was full, but it was definitely not an overnight process.
Yes, and it takes so much time for, big bushes to grow or just plants in general. And it's hard to wait. There are some plants that may grow quicker than others. So I would just recommend looking into that if you are just so excited. But that's a good point to make Ashley, that it takes time to build that space. Just thinking about diversity is an important part of attracting all those creatures that you just talked about. So, and again, you were talking about rocks. Here are another few examples. We have wood chips, rocks, stumps. It does take more upkeep if you do not have a forest to go to, but these spaces are possible with work on the part of the educator to make it a diverse, rich nature-rich environment. So now I'm going to pause and ask you a question. When you think about the outdoor space that you have access to now, what can children engage with when spending time outdoors in your program? I see some chat messages coming in. Thank you all. And again, this is just share your experience and your knowledge, what you are offering in the chat today. Maybe someone else will read that and be inspired to do something similar. So we appreciate the time that you are taking to think about these things and respond. So we're still, again, we're still in this outdoor space because this is so important. And just another thing to think about is the water elements that you may have. So water is especially beneficial for children. Can you include a water table or some sort of water element in your backyard all year round? I know, Ashley, you said you had a mud kitchen. Do you want to talk more about that?
Oh, yes, the mud kitchen is the children's favorite thing to go to. And literally, I just check Goodwill every so often, or you can actually go to any thrift store and just find things in the kitchen. I prefer that rather than getting like children's size materials because the children relate a lot to the cooking materials that they see that their loved ones or caretakers use in the home. So it makes a stronger connection, a stronger touch point. So I just go to Goodwill, fill up my cart, and then I present it and set it up outside. The thing I learned is to find I end up getting plastic bins, but I had to poke holes in it for rain to like run through so water's not sitting in it to store the materials over time. So that was a learning curve, but it's very inexpensive. And again, I'm a big component of like slow building. So then you have a array for children to just explore. They'll take leaves and add to the mud kitchen, sticks to stir it. Even though I do have spoons and spatulas for them to play with, they find things in nature to just stir and cook with. And what's so lovely about it, because it's a sensory piece, but it's also great for vocabulary. So they're talking about what they're cooking, they're talking about the materials. So it's nice as a guide to just like stand back and listen to all the language that is happening.
That's so lovely. And we'll hear even more about that and see some photos later on. So now this last piece, which it sounds like from your comments before, this might be a challenge for some of you in all weather. So the forest school approach is very adamant that there is no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing. So this is very central to the forest school approach. And the reason why is that experiencing weather helps children build that emotional resiliency that they need. So they must know what it feels like to be cold or hot or
Mm.
wet or generally just uncomfortable. And then enduring that, they learn techniques to deal with those feelings of discomfort. So facing those feelings in a very manageable and safe way, that's going to help children build self-confidence, independence, and persistence. And that really begins with proper outdoor gear. So on the slide, you can see we have some waterproof boots. Layers are important. And you'll see here that the children in these slides have rain suits too. And Ashley, I know you don't have to deal with snow, so I love snow, but I think a lot of people would say that you're lucky. But proper gear, especially in the winter, is extremely key, and it doesn't always have to be overwhelmingly expensive. So, like Ashley was saying before, look in your consignment stores, at garage sales, have these conversations with families as well on proper gear, what that means. And this is a really big disclaimer. Do not go outside unless you and your children have the proper gear, because one, it can be unsafe. And two, it can be so overwhelmingly uncomfortable for children that they begin to associate being outside with more negative emotions rather than the emotional resiliency that forest school hopes to nurture in children. So I know some people will choose to purchase waterproof rain suits for the children in their program. Or again, you're going to have to be having these conversations with families. And we'll talk more throughout tonight about how to do that, how to communicate, why these experiences are so important for these children. And now I'm curious, Ashley, what types of experiences have you noticed with children who are properly dressed for the weather? And what about those who are not?
So yes, children who are properly dressed, they stay engaged in whatever they're doing. If they're reading a book, if they're doing handwork, or if they're like in full mode, like play mode, they stay engaged longer than children who are not properly dressed. Or a child could be properly dressed and just feel, it could still, their face could feel cold, right? They tend to just stay closer to the adult. Like I like to say, a child staying underfoot. They stay very close because they're seeking comfort. And so they're trying to just be comfortable for the duration of time. And so having those conversations and being clear about clothing children need is super important. And also, parents are super busy. So you might have to just like keep circling that conversation back. If you know there's like for us, we know when certain brands are on sale. So we just do a gentle reminder to parents like, hey, a labor sale is going on. These brands are on sale. Check it out. Like it's a very open invitation because some parents do need multiple reminders. Hey, winter's coming. Make sure your child still fits the clothes that you bought a couple of years ago. Because I will say the clothes last a long time. My son, this is his third year, and he is still wearing the same clothes. So the clothes do last, but it's super important that children have the correct clothes.
Thanks, Ashley. And I see Michelle has a great comment about licensing, state licensing rules about when it's too hot for children, too cold to go outside. Those you always have to follow, obviously. And I know that you were saying before, Ashley, that if it's a downpour, you will go in, right? And is
Yes.
that right?
So for Georgia, we do not have licensing for forest schools. I know there's certain states that are now going through that process. For Georgia, at the moment, we don't. So we go through actually the rules, what they have for sports. So in terms of like heat, if it's up in the upper 90s, we make sure we have shelter. So we do breaks inside. If it is like pouring down rain, I know there's some schools that the children stay out, but for our community, we did it one time in the pouring rain. And so many children, like we had 5 kids that said, we love the school, but today was really hard. Today's hard. I want to go home. And we're like, we heard that and received that. We're like, yeah, when it's pouring down raining, we're going to make sure we have shelter just to be cozy and comfortable. And so on the days we do that, we spend some time outside when we notice the children's bodies and comfortability. We rest inside. We'll do like a book or some handwork, and then we'll go back outside. But for thunder and lightning, we typically, if it's on the radar, we don't have school that day for thunder and lightning if we have that on our radar. And if we're outside and then we get like a flash thunder or lightning storm, we make sure we go inside and just let parents know to do an early pickup.
I'm what's coming up for me as I hear you talk, Ashley, is the slow to build up for, these all-weather experiences for children because you don't want them to start associating being outside with negative experiences. And I heard you say watch the children, which is something a great technique to do just to make sure that it's not becoming overwhelming for them and past the point of outside has a negative association with it in my brain. Yeah. So we've been talking a lot about the structure, what you're going to be doing in terms of structuring your day, getting outside more for those long, regular sessions in an outdoor space over time in all weather. And now we're going to talk about what will the children do when you're outside. And I know those things have already started to come up. I do have another question for you that is similar to the one I asked before. But what are some of your favorite outdoor activities to do with children? Oh, thank you. Feel free to keep them coming in. We're gonna start chatting about what just a few other ideas for what children may be doing, how you can guide children, or maybe what they're going to be doing naturally when given the opportunity to. And the first is exploring water and mud. So also known as, can be also could be described as the mud kitchen space that you have in your outdoor space. So all you really need to create a mud kitchen is soil, a water source, whether that be if you're in a forest from rain or a river, watering can, and cookware, something for children to engage with. This could be, like Ashley was saying before, old pots and spatulas, or it could be, if you are out in the forest, bark, sticks, and acorns. And if you're brave, a spot for children to dig and gather soil to create their own mud. Mud is also another fun way to give children the opportunity to explore water and mud. So, Ashley, anything else you want to talk? You want to talk about these photos? Tell us about your water and mud space.
So yes, when I say it's so inexpensive to get started, like you can see where our water source is. It's an igloo water container. My dad had it in the back of his truck. He's like, "Hey, do you want this?" And I was like, "This is perfect. It could store water for a mud kitchen." My dad's like, "Okay." But really, it's easy for me to transport. I think it's 3 gallons. It's 3 gallons of water. So again, maybe it gets a little bigger because the kids run through it kind of fast, but it was just perfect because it's easy to transport. The kids love filling it up with water from the water hose. And it's they're able to press the buttons. That was another thing I was looking for. Easy for children to press. And the bin that you see my daughter in is one of those bins I got from Walmart that you can store sweaters in. I literally used that. I got some rocks, seashells. So it's great for her because she, as a toddler, she likes to climb in and sit in it and experience that water. And it's just fun. And I think that bin was no more than $9. And what I like about it, because it comes with a lid. So at the end of water play, I dump out the water and then I put the lid on top of it to prevent like sitting water. And I just keep all of it outside. Nice and easy.
That's such a good tip too, because you don't standing water, mosquitoes,
Lined up
not
right
something. Oh,
away.
you did?
I did. Our yard was like infiltrated with mosquitoes, and I was like, "What is going on?" And then I looked at my kids. I had all the pots, everything out, full of water because we had a heavy rain. I was like, "Oh, okay. I need to make sure I reset every single time."
So learn from Ashley's mistakes. Cover your water or dump it. You don't want mosquitoes. I love that. We have some other examples here of just a mud kitchen space in a backyard. And again, if you are going to a forest, it will be even less structured and way more organic. So again, you might have to bring that water cooler, a watering can. And if you have children who are more used to working with traditional play kitchen toys, they might need more guidance of how to use those imagination muscles in their brains. Hey, look, we have some sticks that we can use for spoons or finding stumps for countertops, things like that. But I love these pictures because not your mud kitchen doesn't have to look like the beautiful Pinterest version, like Ashley was saying. It can be very inexpensive, and children are going to love it just the same. And for those who are wondering, I will send out, there are a lot of great visuals in this presentation throughout. I will send out the slides so that if you would like to look at them again to gather your thoughts and get more ideas, I'll do that in a follow-up email too. All right, building. This is an easy one. Another concept that is very important that you will find very often in a forest school, and this can be done on a small or a large scale. So here we have two children who are both creating dams. One that is very small, made out of rocks, and one that is very large, made out of sticks and branches. And it looks like this child in particular is in a forest. So you can pretend to be busy beavers and experiment with different types of damming strategies. There, like many of you probably already know, there's so much science happening when you're outdoors. So much of the scientific method that children are engaging with naturally when they are building dams or bridges or forts. This can also be done in a backyard water table. If similar to what you could set it up similarly to what Ashley in the photo we saw on the previous two slides. Shallow water, some sand, could be done with rocks. There are many, many different possibilities for building dams. And again, some other examples, bridges, forts, and all of these things can be done on a small or large scale. Climbing, another super simple, easy one, but extremely effective. And Jen will speak later on the importance of climbing and taking risks, which is fantastic. So we won't spend too much time talking about this, but just think about your space or the outdoor space that you will be traveling to, providing those natural climbing areas. It doesn't have to be something that is super formal and expensive. It can be as simple as bringing in some tree stumps or some rocks, maybe for toddlers, or finding sticks that are suitable, branches that are suitable for climbing on if you do not have a tree that children can climb on. And just a few other ideas for ways to engage children in nature. Again, we could have an entire session just on nature-based art. So that is just a really simple point, but there's so much to it. Painting rocks, using rocks as chalk, painting leaves and stamp them on paper. Much easier to get messy when you're outside. And I know we had someone said cloud, watching clouds. That's another great way to engage children in nature, especially on their back. It can be even used as a guidance technique where if a child is experiencing some big feelings, it can be calming to have them lay down and watch the clouds pass, noticing the shapes and the movement. What else do we have? Wildlife viewing, which we've talked about, other people have mentioned too, watching for the animals, squirrels and chipmunks and all the birds and butterflies. And again, those will begin to come when you think about the diversity of your ecosystem wherever you are setting up your forest school. And gardening too. Ashley, would you like to tell us about this photo?
Yes, I was saving my egg cartons to start from seed. So we've been studying the life cycle of plants. And so we planted kale seeds so the children was able to fill the egg carton with dirt. Ideally, you would like to put one seed for each carton, but that did not happen, as you know. To teach early childhood, the seeds just and as a guide, there is this ability to just like let children explore what's going to happen. So right now, out of a whole packet of seeds, we only have 3 seedlings come up. But that's a great observation and conversation. So I'm going to see my students tomorrow to see like, hey, what came up and just problem solve. What can we do something different next time? But the children enjoyed it so much. And as adults, I know it always reminds me some of the things that are so like magical to children are just like regular to us. And sometimes it's good for us to slow down and just sit in childlike wonder with the child while we're going through the process.
I love that. Thank you, Ashley. And finally, we're going to round out this section. If you were looking for permission to remove some of those plastic traditional materials that you have in your outdoor space, here it is in a forest school. If you are hoping to implement the forest school approach, traditional toys are not necessary and actually detract from the natural beauty of nature. So loose parts, which are materials that can be moved or carried, combined, redesigned, taken apart, lined up, put back together. Essentially, the examples here that you can see on the slide, we have pine needles and sticks, shells, rocks, acorns, pine cones. These materials provide an open canvas for creativity and play. Ashley, what do you use as materials in your program?
So for us, we use acorns, pine cones, leaves, rocks. The kids love sticks. Like sticks is like I can't actually define how much they love sticks. It's to the point where children will find sticks at their home, stick it in their backpack, and bring it to forest school. Like, and so now some of the kids will like write their name or they'll paint it. So we all know that is their stick that they're going to engage in with play and will take back home. And so I love it. It just reminds me so much of the childlike wonder, like, okay, what I see as a stick, it actually is something much bigger. So you truly, when you start doing it, it will really surprise you. Like, oh, a child doesn't need all these things. They really can be immersed, but it does take time. Because when I think about year one, some children jump straight into it, and some children was like, what is this? We outside for how long? So what am I gonna do? And now that we're in year 4, it's like they just go right into it. Like parents drop them off and they go right into it where they're not standing close to Shelby and I, like saying, like, so what are we doing now? They just find their flow. So it does take time for some kids.
Especially, I know this because we've talked about this previously, Ashley, especially if you just dive in and take away all the traditional materials that you have, that might be quite a shock to children. Did
Yeah.
you have that experience at all?
So we did, I will say for year one, we didn't have like many, like I will say plastic toys, but for my pod in my home, I do have some plastic toys that our children love. And I had to slowly pull those back because there are some items, like we have like one of those plastic cars that the children sit on and scoot their feet around. Like I know that's a favorite. If I remove that today, I will have 2 children go outside and be like, where's my toy? Like they would just be like, why, like, where is it? And so as a guide, you know your children, right? You know the children that you care for, you love, and you teach. And so there, I do think there is a balance, right? Where we can have the loose part, and we might have 1 or 2 items that you know are our children's favorite, and that slowly could be phased out. But it really should be based on the community that you have.
Perfectly put. Thank you, Ashley. And now, oh, gave you a sneak peek. I am going to ask you one more question before I pass it on to Jana. We've been talking a lot about nature. How do you define nature? All right, if you are in the middle of writing, keep doing so. Send messages in the chat. I'll pass it over to Jana to talk about why this is so important for children to be connected with nature.
Thanks, Grace. I'm going to talk a little bit about why it's important through a model that we found that is called an environmental kinship model. And it's really based on the understanding that everything in the natural world is interrelated and that us as humans are part of that natural world. And that it's important for us to raise the next generation that is connected to and in relationship with nature. And, you know, from a mental health perspective, and many of you have started to talk about this, we know that being in nature reduces stress and it gives more joy and it helps us feel part of something bigger than us and a sense of belonging. And so this model really, I think, is a nice frame to highlight that interconnectedness. It has 4 components: learning about nature, learning in nature, learning with nature, and learning for nature. And I'm going to talk through each one of those and how it benefits children, and just give lots of examples, many of which have already been talked about today. And you can go to the next slide. So the first one is learning about nature. And this is really where we're studying and understanding the natural world. And we can do this in a lot of different ways with children. But Ashley was talking about this, just that simply wondering together, right? Promoting awe and fascination in the natural world. Children have a natural inclination and curiosity already about the world. And when we foster that awe and that wonder, it promotes their future appreciation, empathy, and protection for our environment, because they'll feel in relationship with it. So some examples might be wondering out loud about why birds stick to clothing, or why is the riverbed dry, or what is a frog trying to communicate right now with its calls. It might just be exploring different textures of different trees and pointing out variations of color and flowers, or tracks in the dirt, or noting a change in the wind direction and speed. I remember hearing a story about a school that, their kids were climbing up a hill on a really windy day. And it was just hilarious. They couldn't stop just kind of letting the wind take them and roll down the hill, and just having a great time just with the wind, right? It's something you don't really think about. Different shapes of seeds, or Ashley was talking about the life cycle of the plant, and you can also notice how that compares to life cycle of humans and animals, because we're all on similar life cycles. Thanks, Michelle. Yes, great ideas. And we want to really allow the space, as Grace was talking about, for that natural curiosity, but also through interacting with others, right? And helping, that us being those guides to help them organize information, investigate and research, to deepen their understanding of the world. So we might exchange observations about what floats in a puddle versus what sinks, or take on dramatic play of personifying a bird family, and mimicking. It could be taking replicas and mimicking a local ecosystem, or smashing berries and noticing the different colors. Lots of different things that we could do. And that stoked curiosity becomes just a natural motivator for children for their child-directed curriculum, right? So they're going to independently start gathering those sticks, those natural items. And the hope is that we have tools available to them that they can access themselves and request books to help them investigate. And this creates capable lifelong learners. Instead of us directing them, they're able to request the tools and seek out what they want to be able to investigate. So it could be a book, it could be a tool to dissect a mushroom, or magnifying glass, as you said, a map to plan the day's hike. I read an example that I loved: a spray bottle to mist the spider webs so you can see them more clearly. Binoculars to explore, scales to weigh items, pine cones versus rocks, for example. Tweezers to sort seeds. And you can hear the fine motor, the gross motor, all these things happening, right? The cognitive for sorting things. So when we have those proper tools to help them explore and investigate that natural curiosity, I find when we don't guide it, they will think of creative ways to engage with it that I never would have considered in a million years. So this is, to me, where how do you say that word? Creativity and ingenuity gets born, right? Is when we allow kids to just explore without having a right or wrong way to do it. The next slide is learning in nature. And this is really about tapping into what's possible and provided for already in nature, as we've been talking about. When we have this uninterrupted access to nature, there's tons of amazing research out there that shows it impacts all aspects of their development. It reduces anxiety, stress, depression, and promotes just overall well-being, calmness, joy. And there's a significant decline in behaviors that we find challenging when children spend more time outdoors, which I know all of you as providers would love to love to have happen. And studies have shown that it helps when we spend more time outdoors, it helps children with their cognitive skills. It also helps them improve their attention span and their problem solving abilities and their creativity. And they gain confidence in navigating their surroundings and the world around them. And as I think Jen's going to talk about, their motor control and their ability to navigate and move their own bodies and understand what's risky and what's not for their own body versus us defining that. So some examples of learning in nature. Yes. Oh, did you? Okay. Just making sure. Thank you. Um, you might be carrying and pouring water, as Ashley was talking about, even outside of the mud kitchen, pushing wheelbarrows, building with large tree parts, climbing and rolling tree stumps, using movement to create stories. Those creative and imaginative play with open-ended natural materials. So you might combine petals and bark to make a stew, or sit on a pumpkin and say choo choo and call it a train, right? Or build a fort and it's their new ice cream shop. So it's all within the natural world. We don't need a lot of props to be able to, for them to use their imagination. It could also be just engaging in the real work and giving that sense of community and genuine contribution to their community, their school community, of gardening or composting, making food, turning newspaper into fire bricks, deadheading flowers, shoveling snow, raking leaves. Kids love that sense of purpose for them and love having that job and building that community. And then we also know it builds their sensory system, right? When they're engaging all day in sensory-based learning, to see, to feel, to smell. You can smell the flowers, the fresh air, to listen to nature. And this develops their internal awareness and their sense of a spiritual sense, right? That watching in awe as a spider builds a spider web, right? That there's something pretty spiritual about that. Or just feeling the wind blow on their face, or watching the clouds, or tasting a fresh herb from the garden. Those are all like sensory experiences. And they have an opportunity to discover their strengths and their challenges. Grace was talking about with the weather, right? And Jen will be highlighting more with a risky play within themselves, and develop their own comfort with physical, emotional, and intellectual risks and navigating that. So when we saw those pictures of the dam, right, they could problem solve a little bit with what didn't work. Oh, it didn't stop the water. Maybe I need to rebuild it, right? And have some pride in accomplishing something. Supporting each other and building a tower out of rocks that might be really tall, or gently handling a worm, right? Those are all them learning how to move their body in different ways. Problem solving how to get across a stream, right? A shallow stream. So you can see lots of ideas of where they're building their problem solving skills, and their ability to work together as a team can happen in nature. All right, next slide, learning with nature. And how do we talk about this is it's defined as forming a relationship and a connection with the natural world. We often think about human to human connection, but we know the role that animals and plants can play in our lives. As someone said, trees literally give us oxygen, they support our life. We cannot be here without nature. We are nature. Um, and taking a step back for time and perspective to consider the relationship that we have with plants and animals and the earth and the relationship they have to us. So the idea of it is moving past objectifying nature as something separate and distant from ourselves, and instead seeing that everything has life and purpose in the system and everything's connected. Helping them understand this bird eats this seed and goes over here and fertilizes this when it plants the seed with its when it poops over here, right? Like it's just amazing when you start learning how everything is interconnected. Um, and when we start bringing children into these care routines, to see that they are a part of providing care for nature, like filling a bird feeder or watering plants, um, and talking about these mutual benefits. When I give water to the plant, it gives me food. Um, or giving a bumblebee sugar water and talking about what the bumblebee does for all the flowers and plants, right? Listening to bird calls and what are they communicating? They're actually telling us a lot about what's happening out in our environment if we're listening to them. Um, we might notice spirals in a shell and in a pine cone and a flower and how they're all interconnected, right? So we're giving that opportunity for just them to experience that joyful connection, that admiration. And it might also be acknowledging those that came before us, the traditional relationships with plants and animals, and what that meant, and listening to diverse stories and finding common threads between culture and climate and community. Might also be just moments of silence and giving thanks for what nature has for us. All right, the last one's learning for nature. And then you can see how it's kind of building off of each other. And this is really when children begin to recognize the role of reciprocity in the human connection with the rest, and they want to begin to care for it. And we're developing these cares and these protectors of the natural world and these practices that support sustainability and honor our history and our stories. So some examples of how we might do that are asking grandparents or elders to come for stories. This is something we hope to do in our program. Someone talked about having elders available to be story catchers. You know how when a kid finds something like, oh, this cool rock, I want to show somebody, and they have an elder to show their rock, and they can catch that story about where they found that rock or that cool stick, like you said, Ashley. Um, It might be just collecting garbage, teaching them about minimizing water waste, teaching about solar energy, composting, how to turn different materials into fire starters, planting trees. Oh, I loved when I saw someone said using the gutter rainwater. Like, how can we think about rainwater collection and preserving our water? Um, could be having a worm farm. Those are actually really, really fun, and you can see how they can compost your food and turn it into dirt. Um, and so it could also be about spreading the word in the community and helping them think about what are some other things you can do in your daily life, like having cloth grocery bags and not using plastic, turning off the lights, right? So we might be helping them think about how they are in turn caring for the earth. And that is it. So I'm curious to hear if there's any other ideas for you, but that is the model of kinship.
Thank you, Jana.
Yeah.
Now I pass it on to Jen to talk about dun 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 risk.
I love
Yeah,
it.
risk and risky play uh, is a big part of the forest school approach. I really want to start by just defining risk and putting it in some context. Risky play is some of the play that children love to just naturally gravitate to because it's thrilling and exciting. It gives them that living on the edge feeling. As kids grow up, it's a lot of the play that they remember with fond memories of climbing trees, playing in streams, building bridges. It's just really fun and exciting to them. We're defining risky play tonight as any kind of play with a chance of injury. So things like scrapes, bumps, bruises. And I want to be clear that I'm not talking about hazards, where hazards would be where it's something, a likelihood of injury. So an example of that would be if you see a child climbing a tree and you can see that the next branch they're about to grab or step on is broken, there's a likelihood of falling and big injury. So you'd want to step in and point that out and help them navigate that so they're not running into that hazard. So again, risk is chance of injury and hazard is likelihood. So we're going to be exploring that. What is risky? And I just want to put that in the context of our lives because we accept a lot of risk in our daily lives already. We drive cars, we have stairs in our home, and those are things that bring us a chance of injury, but we don't eliminate them, but we do things to mitigate some of the harm that can happen. We put in car seats for our kids. We wear seatbelts and have airbags. Or for stairs, we attach handrails. We put up gates and we only allow small children to the stairs when we can be there with them. So we do things to mitigate our risk. And so we can do the same thing with the risks that our children take on with nature and outdoors. An example to bring that outside would be throwing rocks. You know, we wouldn't eliminate the risk and say no throwing rocks. But if a child is picking up a rock and their friend is 2 feet in front of them, well, there's a likelihood of injury there that's going to hurt. We're going to step in and say, hey, do you see your friend in front of you? Let's find some more space to throw this rock. And you can find a new spot together to take on that risky play where there's still chance of injury, right? We're throwing rocks, but we're doing what we can to mitigate the harm in any injury. So risky play is really finding that balance of allowing the risk and taking reasonable steps to limit any kind of harm. Because there's lots of benefits, and we're going to get into that shortly too. One other thing I want to say before moving on is that I know we're talking to a lot of people who have multi-age children in one program. So when we talk about risk, it is really important to think about risk in an individual, developmentally appropriate. It's going to be specific to each child, right? And so I know some people will be like, but if I let my 4-year-old jump off this boulder, the 1-year-old is going to see and just think they can do that. Well, that is a good concern, right? Because we want everyone to be safe. What I will say is what we have found, the studies show that most children won't attempt to do something that is well beyond their capability. So they will probably be watching that older child, but not probably very likely to do that exact same thing. They will more likely engage with the material in the risk that feels appropriate to them. So if we look at this picture here, it's kind of like scaffolded landscaping with the water running over it. A 4-year-old might take on the risk to kind of run up and climb this natural landscape, where the risk for the, let's say, 18-month-old is really just to scoot out onto this slippery rock and just reach for the water. So children will usually take on the risk that they feel comfortable with. The other thing about little children watching older children in risky play is that they are also experiencing vicarious risk emotion. So they're getting the excitement and thrill from watching the older children play. So, Grace and I were talking about this before, and she's like, is it like when you're watching a thrilling, exciting movie? And I'm like, yes, it is. It is like you are watching the Tom Cruise, like, do all those crazy stunts and Mission Impossible and just getting that thrill and excitement. That's what the little children are seeing or experiencing when they're watching those big kids to engage in their risky play. All right, Grace, so you go to the next slide for us. I want to talk about just different types of risky play. We've already talked about climbing, that's been mentioned. Another one is speed and impact. You can see in the second picture, the girl is running down a slope and it looks like there's a little stream she's jumping over. Risky play and speed for a toddler could just be running on uneven ground, right? And we might have a feeling of like, oh, don't run, it's uneven, you might fall. But this is where we would allow them to run on even ground and feel the consequences and enjoy that if they want to seek that out. Another type of risky play is playing in or near open water, which we've talked about. This picture is another example of how children will often engage with the materials in a way that feels best for them. And these are a picture of my girls when they were little, and they were about 4 and 3 at the time. And my 4-year-old, I think, went across this log like 6 to 8 times while my 3-year-old watched on. And then she was finally ready to find her own way across the log, which was scooting, and probably took her 10 minutes to like scoot all the way across. Another type of risky play in the last picture is using tools. So this child's using a hammer. Maybe for older children might be using whittling knives, things like that. And we get to talk about the benefits of risky play. Research shows that there are a lot of benefits to risky play. One of them is discovery. They're discovering the environment, materials, discovering their self. Jenna mentioned just like their physical capabilities, getting a chance to develop their balance, building their strength, learning that learning about the materials in their world. We can tell them that ice is really slippery, but they're going to really know that ice is slippery when they're all on fours and trying to figure out how to get back up. And so allowing them these discoveries themselves is just really powerful. They also can learn to take on different challenges. So like Janice said, they're getting into problem solving, judgment and decision-making skills, which all help build their grit, confidence, the positive self-esteem, allows them to show their courage. I think about these kids on this log pile, and I just wonder, do they all want to get up there? Could they even all get up in the same way? They probably had to really figure out, based on their capabilities, how they could get up. Maybe somebody needed to roll a log over. Maybe they needed help getting their log rolled over. There's so many things that they are figuring out. And it's such a wonderful opportunity. And again, when it's that risky, fun play for them, they have internal motivation to keep trying. So I think that's a huge piece too, because Grace talked about the emotional resiliency. When you take on challenge, there's failure involved. But we know that failure is a part of the process of learning and growing and finally getting it. And so what a great way to allow them these opportunities to practice experiencing the emotions of failure, of discouragement, of feeling like, how do I work my way through this? How do I pick myself back up and try again? And when it's something exciting to them and thrilling, they have that internal motivation to keep trying and to keep getting it. And to help their friends get it too, because they want their little buddies to make it to the top with them and all experience like the joy of that together. So these are just really beautiful learning experiences that children can get through the Speak Play. Next, we'll move into the role of the leader. And one type of risky play I didn't mention in the past slide, but you'll see it in this first picture, is rough and tumble play or play fighting. And I will say, one role of the leader is to stay nearby. I would say especially for with that rough and tumble play, because you're going to be wanting to hear, all right, when is one child all done? And how can I help slow them down? How can I intervene to help them slow down, to learn to advocate for themselves, to talk about what they like and don't like or how they're feeling, and then helping their friend respond, right? Maybe we're all done. Maybe we modify the play so that it's continually enjoyable for everybody. And you're just helping with that conflict resolution if there is a problem. So staying nearby is an important role. I also talked about eliminating hazards. So just going back to that, if you're seeing something where you're like, this is very clearly dangerous and someone's going to get hurt, you would want to step in and again help them modify or choose something different. Another really important piece is helping them to navigate the challenge, to navigate the risk, to see what's happening. So finding descriptive language to talk about what you're seeing and noticing, and to help them make a judgment, and maybe possibly to help them mitigate any risk. So I'm thinking about this second picture of this little girl. You know, maybe she started off walking on these uneven stumps on 2 feet, and you can see that she's a little wobbly. That's when you might use some descriptive language like, oh, you look a little wobbly. Do you feel stable? And she's like, no. Okay, would you like to hold a hand? Maybe you want to try putting your hands and feet down to get a little more steady. And then you're saying, how do you feel now? Or, you know, if she's climbing higher and higher and you can see it's getting pretty high, but she's not paying attention, you might say, hey, I notice you're getting higher. What's your plan for coming down now? Right? You're using language to help them notice, help them become aware of what's happening around them so that they can figure out how to keep going about the challenge and the risk, or how to come out of it if they are wanting to come out of it. I will say, oh, before moving on, Grace, I do want to say one more thing. I think in our society we say like be careful and watch out, or just very kind of simple phrases. I will say they come from a good place. They come from a good place of care, and they're just not always the most helpful at bringing that awareness or problem solving. So at the end of our presentation, Grace always does a follow-up email of different phrases and STEM words you can use to help foster that rich language that brings awareness and problem solving, beyond be careful or watch out. So those were really helpful for me when I started out, because I just be watching my very risk loving 2-year-old, and I just be like, oh, be careful. It just was at the tip of my tongue all the time. And I would write down some of these phrases and put them in my pocket when we go to forest school, because I just needed to practice some of that new language for me. And the kids were so receptive to it, because I think they loved being in charge of their own body. And when I helped bring that language, you could see they felt a lot of agency over themselves and what they were doing. And anyway, that's just a tip. Put some of those phrases in your pocket if you're like me and those be careful things just come up first.
Jen, can I add something?
Yeah.
I just wanted to, I know this is so common for you to instinctively want to say be careful to a child, and just to reiterate that it's coming from a place of care and love for that child, wanting to keep them safe. So I just wanted to reiterate that there's nothing inherently wrong with telling a child to be careful, that you are showing that you care for them deeply and that you don't want them to get hurt. What's so great about this resource that you will get in a follow-up email that Jen is referring to is that there are better ways to talk with children about their body awareness. So thanks, Jen. I had to add that in.
Yeah. Thank you. No, they're so helpful, because it's hard for me to come up with it on my own. But when I hear the stems, like, oh, notice how, or what's your plan for getting across the water, it helps to have those examples. All right, next we're going to move into site safety. If you are looking to go into the forest or go into the prairie, it's important to check your site for hazards. When we were looking at forest school options here in Madison, the adults would go to the site first to really check it out. Remember, we went to one of my favorite places in Madison, Governor's Island, and there's some sloping access to the lake. And then we kept walking, and there's like a cliff off to the lake. And I was like, well, that site's out, right? That's a hazard. I can't remove a cliff. We got to keep looking. And other hazards could be, just making sure there isn't like a lot of poison ivy in the springtime, right? So as seasons change, paying attention to getting to know your site really well to make sure there aren't hazards. It's important to set up clear boundaries if you are in a natural area. Those could be, like in this picture, a fallen log, the stream, the edge of the lake. You can set up, hang up reflection tape between trees, just so children know exactly where it's safe for them to freely explore. And then just making sure you have good sight and sound supervision within that space. Something to consider for safety is making sure in that space you have a good cell phone connection. I know Jana also mentioned there are Amazon sells like these satellite communicators where you can send emergency messages. If you have a group where you're like, there's no way I could take this group out into the woods by myself, then don't. Safety is number one. So if you have a group like that, it might be a time to think about staying to your backyard, or asking a parent if they'd want to join you, or a community volunteer, but making sure you feel safe and comfortable with your group in the area that you decide on. One other thing, if you are in your backyard and you want to do a mud pit or a mud kitchen, making sure you can always call Digger's Hotline to know where all the lines are buried in your backyard so that you know where those safe spots to dig and get messy are. Then we want to think about ongoing safety. It's really important to be updated with your first aid because the scrapes and bumps and bruises will happen. In Wisconsin, I don't know about you, Ashley, but we have ticks and they're yucky. So making sure if you are out in nature, that parents know the days you're out and what you're doing so that they can do tick checks at around, bath time is a nice time to do that. If you are ever removing a tick, keep it in a plastic bag so that if there is any healthcare treatment that needs to be done, that can help the providers navigate that. I talked about poison ivy. There's wild parsnip and other harmful plants. I use a app on my phone called PlantNet that can help you identify different plants to see if they're harmful, but it's also a very awesome app to just learn the names of flowers and different plants that you encounter. And then Grace touched on how important clothing is. And I would just say this is an ongoing thing because even if you have the right clothing, water can seep in. And if it's cold and the base layers are wet, it can be really uncomfortable and unsafe if it's cold. So just paying attention to the kids, making sure they're wearing, covering their ears, have those mittens on, and just kind of checking in with them on how they're doing and how their bodies are holding up.
Thank you, Jen. I want to add to something that keeps coming up for me as I listen to you talk about this is the role of the leader and how much learning that you must, as an educator, take on about all of the natural elements that you have around you. So you have to know what poison ivy looks like or what a tick looks like, different types of ticks, where you can find them, places to maybe avoid. Having that knowledge takes time and effort. And I'm wondering, Ashley, would you want to speak about that, your experience as a forest school leader?
Yes, it does take time and effort, like even like winding all the way back when we're just talking about risky play and keeping your body present. Like when I'm nodding my head, I'm like, yes, 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 yes. Because as a guide, I will say it's easy as shutting everything down. Don't hit like that. Stop playing like that. Don't climb that. Like it's actually easy just to say no. It is a lot of work seeing children engage in risky play and rough play and just being super vigilant about watching body language and know when it goes too far or know when children really like it and keep checking in with children so they can have that expressive language to say like, oh, I'm done playing. That's enough. Stop. Or like, hey, I really like this. I really like engaging in this kind of play. And so it is like a constant muscle that needs to be worked because there is a level of vigilance that you just need to always keep your eyes out. So you can provide children that language when they are climbing on something like, does this feel steady? Or you're watching that if a child slip, you're able to move quick enough to support. Or if you don't support, you're able to tell the parent what happened, because that's also very key. We're human. I don't know how large your program, because our program, we have 21 kids. So there are times where children fall, stumble, all the things, and that Shelby and I did not see. And so having those conversations, but we have built that relationship with families that they know we are very vigilant. We watch, but we also are human. So your child might get a cut or a bruise or a scratch, and we don't know how that happened, right? But it is a constant work, but it's good work. I know the muscle, when you're strict, you're like, this is a lot of work, but the payoff does happen because then children actually start watching out for one another. I can't tell you the countless times where I could hear children say they're like, hey, that doesn't look safe, or do you feel okay doing this? Or let me get a teacher. Like they start caring for one another when they hear the guides using that language and having that level of care.
I've even noticed that, and I'm sure you have too, Ashley, just the difference in how it affects the other children, like you were just explaining, when you change from saying something more simple or generalized, like, hey, watch out or be careful, to that descriptive language, because you're giving them more that they can use in just with their own body, and then also when they're watching out for their peers that they care about.
Because children love that agency. They really do. They actually do like to have the opportunity to see how far they can push their bodies. It's very uncomfortable for us. Very uncomfortable for us. But children truly like to be in a space where they can stretch the bounds of what they can do, because we have to also be mindful that parents might not have that kind of margin to do that, where they might say no more often than yes, or like, let's see or watch before saying that no or redirecting. So we are truly giving children a gift when we're able to provide these opportunities, because they really are opportunities. I can't tell you enough that parents are like, they only do this with you. And I'm like, okay, that's okay, because I'm like, you have a lot of things on your plate, and let us take that off your plate. Let us be that for them. So it is truly a blessing.
Thanks, Ashley. And we're just going to hear more from you because we are going to end out our event tonight talking about arguably one of the most important pieces of implementing a forest school approach. We just threw a lot of information at you, clearly. The key to implementing this is going to be communicating with your families. As Ashley already alluded to, we're going to talk about that more. We know in family childcare, you have extremely strong relationships with your families. So we're going to end tonight talking about how you, as a childcare professional, can confidently speak with families, tell them about the benefits, and then nurture that relationship over time. So, number one, like I already said, share those benefits of nature experiences in early childhood and risky play. You can even use the environmental kinship model that Jana was talking about earlier. These resources will be emailed to you. Share those with families. Also, discuss the risks. Be open about what may happen when children engage in risky play, but then also what you are doing as an educator to help mitigate and lessen those risks so that children will have a lower chance of being severely injured when they are testing the limits of their bodies, which they need to do. And they so seldom get the chance and opportunity to. And finally, the last point on here before I turn it over to Ashley, because Ashley has done so much work communicating and advocating for children's nature experiences, but just continue that communication. Let them know the plan. As Jen was talking about earlier, if you're going to a forest and it's tick season, or really actually any time of year, let parents and families know that so that they can be mindful and check their child later in the day for ticks. When you're handing over, say, a really, really messy child who spent way too much time in the mud kitchen that day over to a family member, share those experiences, share photos and videos. I'm sure many of you are already doing that because you shared with us that you are already having great experiences with nature every day. But essentially, this boils down to be that advocate for your children's experiences in nature. Partner with them. Ashley, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, it all ties to the communicate often, but also have different ways you are doing that communication. For some parents, they love everything in written form, like an email, a newsletter. They love that. And then for some parents, it is another thing to read. So having a way where you are putting things an email or newsletter form for those parents who actually don't, like when we have those verbal communications, it's great, but then I forget an hour later. So like having things written down is important, but having those in-person opportunities as well. Like if you're trying to share those benefits about being outdoors, have like your open house or have your parent night, or if you do anything where parents are coming in, why don't you have that outdoors? So parents can actually see how their children are engaging in your space outdoors. So parents can hear if you do need to redirect a child, if you do need to check in with the child, say, hey, do you like that? Does this feel stable? Where's your footing? So parents can see and hear it, because it is just different than reading it on a page for a lot of parents. They do actually need to see it in action. They do need to see how their child interact with other children. So being able to have things in nature when you're with families is just icing on the cake if you're able to. Another piece about that communication is if it's rainy, if it's a rainy day and it's on the forecast, reminding families to like have extra clothes ready, because we're half-day programs, so a lot of our families are always doing something after our program's done. They're either running errands or they have doctor's appointments. So on days where we know like a child's gonna just have really fun and get really muddy, we just let families know like, hey, this is a muddy day. If you have plans after school today, please bring extra clothes. Because again, we know our parents have so much. A lot of you on the call might be parents. You have so much on your mind, and sometimes the last thing on your mind is, oh, my child's gonna come from school muddy, and I don't want to take my muddy child to the grocery store, to the doctor's office. So sometimes as guides, as teachers, we have so much on our plate. So sometimes you're like, do I have to write the extra message? It really truly helps the parents and families involved to just, and the people who get it, they'll read it, got it. And those who are still learning that, they're so grateful. They're like, didn't think about that. So that also just builds a love for being outside. Because if you think about, if you love nature, sometimes you don't actually think about all the barriers about being in nature. But if you're able to like think about those barriers and within your capacity and within the margin you have, right? We can't do everything, but within your margin, if you could like slowly take away some barriers, it really brings more people to the side of seeing the benefits of nature. But what we really are working towards, that long-term benefit that they're going to stay in nature beyond when the child's 3 and 4, because that's what we're pushing for. We're pushing for lower and upper elementary children in nature, middle schoolers in nature, high schoolers in nature. Because typically when we do talk about nature, it is those early childhood experiences. And then it kind of dwindles down as the child gets quote unquote more academic. You see parents not really thinking about the nature side because it's so closely intertwined with early childhood. So you really are you're planting seeds for children and families to continue having a nature-based philosophy within education, hopefully all the way through the child's development.
And Ashley, I also think about how what you were alluding to, how some parents or family members, they might not have great experiences in nature that they can remember when they were children. They might not have those experiences that they want to pass down to their children. So, what a great opportunity it could be for you as an educator of their child to help bring them in, show them the wonders of nature, how it is affecting their child, all of the benefits. Because I know what you had said, Ashley, it was a struggle to get forest school, your forest school started, right? Talking with
Yes,
families and parents. Do you want to just say a little bit
yes.
about that? Because I'm
And
sure many people on this call might have some um, parents who are more wary of, I don't want my child running around a forest, or you're going to go outside when it's raining or really cold, things like that.
There was a huge barrier 'cause it was just something that was hard to visualize. Like my child doesn't like, why would my child want to play in the rain? Why did my child wants to be out in the cold? And then you also have to understand the families wasn't having their child play in the rain at home. Like they wasn't seeing it. So then to say I'm sending my child to this school while they're doing it, I just feel like that's a waste of time. Like they could be doing something else. So understanding where parents are coming from, or guides or loved ones or family members, they're trying to wrap their head around this concept. And so the more they can see it, I will say the more that it can be seen, if like open houses or community days, it really helps people get on board. And that's what we had to do with Gather. We had to do many open houses where we would like set up a school day, and interested families would come and they would see their child and they're like, oh, my child's engaging in this way. I didn't think so. Like it would literally surprise them how their child would interact in nature. Cause it was like, I never thought my child would be doing these things. But it's so helpful when you're able to take research and all the writings off the page for people to feel it, touch it, and be in community. I will say having the families together was so nice, so they can see and talk and share their own experiences.
Thank you, Ashley. And I see we have one question in the chat, which is perfect timing because we wanted to make sure we had enough time for questions while we had Ashley here, Jana, and Jen to answer some of the wonderings that you have. Maybe you want to implement this, but you have some barriers that you want to talk about here as a group. So I see the first question is for you, Ashley. Do you see children get sick often? How do you handle this?
So I will say, I'll say if I'm comparing it to more of a childcare in-home situation where you're not outside often, no, like that was one of the things that was the first thing parents told us. They're like, I'm shocked that my child hasn't gotten sick yet. And so I'm like, being outdoor does help that element, but we also are very clear with families that if your child is showing signs of sickness, to not bring them within the community. Because we've had cases of a child contracting hand, foot, and mouth at another place, and then bringing that child into the school, and it spread to all. Like half of our class ended up getting hand, foot, and mouth. And some children got it very severe, and some children you couldn't even tell they have it. So we constantly are having those conversations with families that if you notice symptoms of anything, to please keep your child at home, because it does spread like wildfire. Because children, even though we are outside, right, children still like to play in close proximity with one another.
I want to add my history hat. I'm going to put it on, and I'm just going to offer that nature-based, like outdoor classrooms were originally created for children who were chronically ill and to mitigate transmission of illnesses among children. So I just wanted to add that too, that children do get sick less. I see Jana put in the chat because they aren't trapped indoors with all the germs. And Jenna, could you say more about dirt and microbes and things
Not
like that?
really. I'm not a
Oh,
scientist. I just Googled it quick because I had heard this that there's microbes that help like prevent asthma and illness and actually support not being depressed. There's something that helps with depression in microbes. So you could do some reading yourself. I'm not sure. I'm not an expert on it, but it's pretty interesting.
thanks, Jenna. I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, that's okay.
All right. Any other questions, wonderings about how you may implement regular long sessions in an outdoor space over time in all weather. If this inspired you.
I was thinking about the muddy problem and sending kids home, and we're trying to get creative with that. And I was just, besides the muddy buddies, but if it's warm out, uh, you can have change of clothes on hand to, ask parents to bring them in so that you have them on hand. But maybe they can run through the sprinkler. You can spray them down with a hose. There's lots of ways to make it a little easier on parents. Uh, and still fun and a game for kids too.
I know one family childcare educator who in the summer just right away in the morning, children show up, swimsuits go on, outdoors, messy all day long. And then they spray them down with the hose when they got to go inside.
I think that goes back to just having different ways to communicate with the parents too. I've seen in some family childcare providers, um, them putting it in their policies, like messy clothes at school, right? Like save your nice dresses and those nice shoes for those other events. I don't care if they wear the same three outfits when they come. We want to get messy. And so she, has that in her policies, but then there's conversations around it too. So just different ways to, yeah, just keep inviting that messy play and helping everyone feel okay about that.
We used to have a lot of extra clothes on hand, but then for our community, they keep clothes in their car. So like Shelby and I just kept lugging clothes back and forth. So then we no longer carry so much extra clothes. We do keep extra clothes just if a child has toilet, a toilet mishap, things like that to quickly have on hand. But the parents just carry in their car. That's what I actually told parents. That's what I do too as a mom. I have a like duffel bag, just clothes that I keep in the car because changing back and forth and like just keep a duffel bag with that and towels. Extra towels because sometimes the kids are so muddy that you just need to put something down for the child to sit on. And I tell folks, go secondhand. Like these are just things to put your child in when they're super dirty, just secondhand it.
Thank you so much to Jen, Ashley, and Jana for coming and speaking about forest school and rich nature experiences in early childhood. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of you who joined us this evening. Your time is very valuable, and we appreciate your attention and your participation throughout this event, because that's what's going to really round it all out for everyone.